Lucas gripped the steering wheel of his old Ford pickup with a grimace. He was sweating in the late afternoon sun as he drove through the streets of his Austin suburb. His work shirt was stained with oil and sweat. He'd spent the last 10 hours at Mike's auto shop, fixing engines. His muscles were tired, but he was happy to be on his way home to Maple Street. No matter how tough the day had been, coming home to Megan always made things better. She was his wife of 5 years and had a way of brightening even his darkest moods with her infectious laugh and warm brown eyes. Pulling into the driveway, Lucas frowned. Megan's blue Prius was there, but so was a gleaming black truck he didn't recognize. He told himself that it was probably just a neighbor, ignoring the uneasy feeling in his gut. He climbed out of the car and walked up to the front door, his back protesting at the movement. Lucas winced as he stepped inside the front door, which was unlocked. The familiar sense of home washed over him as he was greeted by the smell of lemon cleaning products and the faint trace of Megan's favorite vanilla candles. He called out, dropping his keys in the dish by the door, "I'm home." There was no answer, and Lucas's frown deepened as he made his way through the living room. Everything looked normal, the same worn couch. Megan had a stack of teaching materials on a coffee table, but something fell off. He heard muffled voices coming from upstairs and started up his work boots, which were heavy on the carpeted steps. "Megan," he called again as he reached the top of the stairs. The bedroom door flew open, and Megan emerged, her face flushed and her long dark hair disheveled. She was carrying a suitcase. Lucas froze, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. What was going on? Megan's eyes met his, and for a moment he saw a flicker of something, like guilt or regret, before her expression hardened. "I'm leaving." The words hit him like a physical blow. "What are you talking about?" She brushed past him, heading for the stairs. "I can't do this anymore. I'm done." Lucas followed her, his mind reeling. "I'm done," he said. "What's wrong?" "I don't know," Megan replied. "Or we can fix it." Lucas followed her. His mind was reeling. "I'm done," he said. "With what?" "With you," Megan replied. "I'm leaving." She faced him at the bottom of the stairs, her eyes flashing. "Fix it like you've been promising to fix things for the past 2 years," she said. She let out a bitter laugh. "I'm done with your excuses, Lucas. I'm done with your broken promises, and I'm sure I'm done with your Inez." Lucas felt his face burning with a mixture of shame and anger. "Is that what this is about? Our sex life?" "Megan, if you're unhappy, we can work on it. We can go to counseling, try new things. It's not just about sex." Megan said, "It's about feeling valued and like I matter. When was the last time you asked about my day or did something spontaneous or exciting?" Lucas opened his mouth to argue but couldn't think of a good comeback. He couldn't remember the last time he'd done any of those things. Megan's voice softened slightly. "I need more, Lucas. I need someone who sees me and makes me feel alive. Makes me feel alive." Before Lucas could respond, the front door opened and a man stepped in. He was tall and lean with perfectly styled hair and a smile that could sell ice to Eskimos. He was wearing an expensive-looking suit that made Lucas acutely aware of his own grease-stained jeans. "Is everything okay in here?" the man asked. His voice was smooth as silk. Troy called and he said, "Well, I'm here to pick up Megan." Lucas ignored him. He looked at his wife, and he could see the disbelief in her eyes. "This is why you're leaving for him." Megan at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Troy and I have connected. He understands me in a way you never have. We've known each other for 3 weeks, Troy added, as if that explained everything. Lucas felt like he was drowning. Struggling to make sense of what was happening, Troy said, "You're throwing away our marriage for a guy you've known for 3 weeks. It's not like that." Megan protested, weakly. "Then what is it like?" Lucas demanded, "Explain it to me, Meg. I'm having a real hard time understanding how you could do this." Troy stepped forward, placing a possessive hand on Megan's waist. "I think it's pretty clear, buddy. Megan's made her choice. Time for you too." Lucas saw red and lunged forward, grabbing Troy by the collar of his fancy suit. "Get your hands off my wife," he growled. Troy's smug smile finally faltered. He tried to push Lucas away, but years of working on cars had given Lucas a strength that the real estate agent couldn't match. Lucas stopped it. Megan cried, trying to pull them apart. Lucas released Troy with a shove, sending him stumbling back against the wall. "Get out of my house," he snarled. "Listen here, you grease monkey," he spat. "Forget her, she belongs to me now." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Lucas felt a tightness in his chest. a mixture of rage and heartbreak, threatening to overwhelm him. He turned to Megan. His voice low and dangerous, he asked, "Is that true, Meg? Do you belong to him now?" Megan wouldn't meet his eyes. "Lucas, please don't. Make this more difficult than it has to be." Lucas let out a humorless laugh. "You're leaving me for this guy, and you're worried about making it difficult for me." He shook his head, a cold determination settling over him. "Fine, you want to go, go, but don't think you can come crawling back when this blows up in your face." Megan's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if you walk out that door with him, don't bother coming back ever." Lucas's voice was firm. "You made your choice, Megan. Now you get to live with it for a moment." Megan's face showed uncertainty for a second. Then Troy's hand was on her arm, gently tugging her towards the door. "Come on, baby, let's get out of here," he said. Megan hesitated for just a second before nodding and picking up her suitcase and moving towards the door. She paused to look back at Lucas one last time and whispered, "I'm sorry." Lucas said nothing. His jaw was clenched tight as he watched his wife walk out of their home and out of his life with another man. The door closed behind her with a soft click that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Lucas stood there, jaw clenched tight, watching his wife walk out of their home and out of his life with another man. The door closed behind her with a soft click that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Lucas stood there, rooted to the spot, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. The house that had always been his sanctuary now felt alien and empty. He moved on autopilot, climbing the stairs to their bedroom. His eyes fell on the framed photo on the dresser, and he picked it up with shaking hands. It was from their wedding day, both of them beaming at the camera, full of hope and dreams for the future. Lucas sank onto the bed, still clutching the photo as memories washed over him. It was the first day of their sophomore year at the University of Texas. He had overslept and was sprinting across campus, desperately trying to make it to his 8 a.m. He made it to class on time, but as he rounded a corner at full speed, he collided with someone, sending books and papers flying everywhere. He was so sorry and immediately started helping to pick up the scattered materials. That's when he looked up and saw her. She was the most beautiful girl he'd ever laid eyes on. She had long dark hair, warm brown eyes, and a smile that made his heart skip a beat. She laughed and accepted the stack of books. He introduced himself as Megan Lucas. He stammered a bit and managed to say, "I like your shirt." Megan glanced down at his burnt orange shirt. "Thanks," she said. "Are you a Longhorns fan too?" Lucas nodded eagerly. "I'm a born and raised Longhorn. My dad used to take me to games when I was a kid." They chatted for a few more minutes, completely forgetting about their classes. By the time they parted ways, Lucas had her number and a promise to meet up for coffee later. From that week on, they were inseparable. Lucas was studying mechanical engineering, with a passion for designing cutting-edge cars. Megan was studying education, with a passion for shaping young minds. They spent long nights in the library quizzing each other and stealing kisses between chapters. Weekends were for Longhorns games, picnics in Zilker Park, and exploring Austin's vibrant music scene. Their dreams. It all seemed to fit perfectly. Lucas would work for a big car company designing the cars of the future. Megan would teach at an elementary school, nurturing the next generation. They bought a house, started a family, and built a life together. But life had other plans. As the memories shifted, Lucas's grip on the photo tightened. He'd struggled to find work after graduation. The recession had hit the auto industry hard, and it was difficult to get entry-level engineering positions. There weren't many level engineering positions around at the time, but Megan got a job at a local elementary school pretty quickly. At first, Lucas was really happy for her. He started working at an auto repair shop, telling himself it was just a temporary thing. He'd keep applying, keep networking, and eventually land his dream job. But as months turned into years, the rejections piled up. Lucas watched as Megan's career flourished. She was a natural teacher, loved by her students and respected by her colleagues. Meanwhile, he was still changing oil and fixing transmissions. He came home each day smelling of grease and disappointment. He started working longer hours, telling himself he was saving up for their future. But deep down, he knew it wasn't going to be easy. Over the years, Lucas was repeatedly turned down for jobs. Meanwhile, Megan was enjoying success in her career as a teacher, with students and colleagues alike appreciating her work. For his part, Lucas was still changing oil and fixing transmissions, coming home each day with grease on his hands and a sense of disappointment. He started working longer hours, telling himself he was saving up for their future, But deep down, he knew it wasn't enough. He knew he was avoiding the growing tension at home. Megan never said it outright, but he could see the disappointment in her eyes. This wasn't the life they'd planned. Their conversations grew shorter, and their silences longer. Intimacy became a rare occurrence, weighed down by unspoken resentments and unfulfilled expectations. Lucas threw himself into his work, taking on extra shifts and weakening jobs if he couldn't be the successful husband Megan deserved. He could at least provide for her financially. But in doing so, he lost sight of what really mattered. He'd stopped asking about her day and stopped planning surprise dates or weekend getaways. He'd been so focused on what he lacked that he'd forgotten to appreciate what he had. And now it was too late. He worked extra shifts and took on extra jobs to provide for Megan financially. But in doing so, he lost sight of what really mattered. He'd stopped asking about her day, stopped planning surprise dates or weekend getaways. He'd been so focused on what he lacked that he'd forgotten to appreciate what he had. Now it was too late. A loud honk from outside made Lucas jump. He moved to the window just in time to see Troy's black truck pulling out of the driveway. Megan was in the passenger seat. They were laughing about something carefree and happy. It was the last thing Lucas expected to see. As they disappeared down the street, he felt something harden inside him. The initial shock and heartbreak was turning into cold, seething anger. Anger at Megan for giving up on them. Anger at Troy for swooping in and stealing his life. But most of all, anger at himself for letting things get to this point. He looked down at the wedding photo, still clutched in his hand, and threw it across the room. The frame shattered against the wall, glass tinkling as Lucas threw the photo to the floor and stood there breathing heavily, surrounded by the broken pieces of his marriage. He'd been too passive for too long, letting life happen to him instead of taking control. Well, no more. Megan thought she could just walk out on him, fine. But he wasn't going to sit around feeling sorry for himself. He was going to pick himself up, dust himself off, and show her exactly what she'd thrown away. He went away and asked for Troboy. Lucas's lips curled into a grim smile. The smug bastard had no idea what was coming. He'd taken everything from Lucas, and now Lucas was going to return the favor. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Lucas pulled out his phone and dialed a familiar number. After a few rings, a voice answered. "Hey Marcus, it's Lucas. Mom, I need your help. Can you come over? I've had a story that would blow your mind." As he hung up, Lucas took one last look around the bedroom he'd shared with Megan for the past 5 years. Tomorrow he'd start packing up her things. Tomorrow he'd begin the process of untangling their lives. But tonight he was going to start planning his revenge. The sharp knock at the door pulled him from his brooding thoughts. He'd been sitting in the dark living room for hours. Lucas replayed the day's events over and over in his mind. Each time, his anger grew. He hauled himself off the couch and opened the door. Marcus stood there, concern etched on his face. What? When? Why? Today? About 4 hours ago. Lucas led the way to the kitchen, pulling 2 beers from the fridge. He handed one to Marcus before taking a long swig from his own. "She's shacking up with some hotshot real estate agent, apparently. I'm not exciting enough for her anymore." Marcus let out a low whistle. "Damn, Lucas, I'm sorry, that's rough." Lucas's grip tightened on his bottle. "I don't want Marcus. I don't want your pity. I need your help. What did you have in mind?" "I'm his friend, Wiley. Revenge." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with promise. Marcus sat down at the kitchen table. He was serious. "Lucas, I know you're hurting, but revenge isn't the answer. It won't make you feel better in the long run." Lucas slammed his beard down, making Marcus jump. "You think I care about? I'm not looking for closure or to move on. I want them to pay for what they've done." Megan and Troy's new boyfriend, Lucas, spat the name like it left a bad taste in his mouth. He waltzed in here like he owned the place. He called me. He trailed off, still ringing in his ears. Marcus leaned forward. His voice was gentle. "What did he call you?" Lucas met his friend's gaze. His eyes were blazing with fury. "He called me a asterisk. CK said Megan belongs to him now." "Jesus," Marcus muttered. "What exactly?" Lucas began pacing the kitchen. "So, are you going to help me or not?" Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair. "What exactly did you have in mind?" A grim smile spread across Lucas's face. "I'm glad you asked." Over the next hour, Lucas laid out his plan. He wanted To find out more about Troy and discover what he's hiding about stealing Marcus's wife. Lucas believes Troy is hiding something, and I agree. I want to find out what it is and use it to my advantage. Marcus listened, his expression becoming more troubled with each passing minute. When Lucas finally fell silent, Marcus spoke up. You're angry, but this is crazy. You're talking about stalking the guy, maybe even breaking the law. I can't be part of that. Lucas's face hardened. I thought you were my friend. I am your friend. They're living it up with Mr. Perfect. There's no way I'm going to let that happen. I stood up, my voice firm. I'm not going to help you ruin your life over this, Lucas. Megan made her choice. It sucks, but you need to accept it and move on. For a moment, I thought about lashing out and telling Marcus to go to hell, but as I looked at my friend's concerned face, I realized I needed to change tactics. I slumped into a chair, burying my face in my hands. I just don't know how to handle this. He slumped into a chair, burying his face in his hands. You're right, he mumbled. I'm not thinking straight. I just don't know how to handle this. I know, man, said Marcus. He sat back down and placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder. I'm here for you. But revenge isn't the answer. How about we get out of here for a bit and clear your head? He nodded, conceding the point. Yeah, okay, you might be right. I'll just grab my jacket. He headed upstairs. Lucas smiled to himself. He owed himself a small victory. Marcus might not be willing to help directly, but he'd inadvertently given Lucas exactly what he needed as an alibi over the next few weeks. In the evenings, workers offered sympathy and support. He'd meet up with Marcus or other friends, playing the part of the heartbroken husband, trying to piece his life back together. But late at night, when the rest of the world was asleep, Lucas hunted. He scoured social media, pored over public records, and lurked on real estate forums. Slowly but surely, a picture of Troy Caldwell began to emerge. Troy was everything Lucas wasn't. He was successful, charming, and ambitious. But as Lucas dug deeper, he found cracks in the glossy facade. Troy had a string of failed businesses behind him. Each one ended in bankruptcy and unpaid debts. He'd been sued multiple times by former clients who claimed he'd misrepresented properties. Most interestingly, he had a habit of dating women who were going through divorces or bad breakups. He kept digging and found some cracks in Troy's shiny exterior. Troy had a string of failed businesses behind him, each one ending in bankruptcy and unpaid debts. He'd been sued multiple times by former clients who claimed he misrepresented properties. Most interestingly, he had a habit of dating women who were going through divorces or bad breakups. Guess I'm not the first sucker you've played, Troy muttered, as he added another note to his growing file. But the real breakthrough came 3 weeks into his. While looking into the matter, Lucas came across a post from 5 years ago on an old community forum. It was from a woman named Sarah, who'd been duped by a smooth-talking real estate agent. Troy Caldwell, as it turned out. Lucas read and reread the post, and it seemed to fit the bill. But he needed more than just an old forum post. He needed proof. After another week of searching, Lucas finally found Sarah's current contact details. He dialed the number, his hands shaking as he waited for her to answer. Hello? A woman's voice said. Is this Sarah Thompson? Lucas asked. Yes, who's this? The woman replied. My name is Lucas Hart. I know this is going to sound strange, but I need to talk to you about Troy Caldwell. There was a long pause before Sarah spoke again. Her voice was cautious. What about him? She asked. He's dating my wife, Lucas replied. My wife and I think he might be trying to scam her. There was another long pause, then Sarah sighed heavily. I was afraid of this. He's still at it, isn't he? Over the next hour, Sarah told Lucas everything. She told him how Troy had charmed her when she was vulnerable after her divorce. She told him how he convinced her to invest in a can't-miss real estate opportunity. She told him how he'd vanished once the money was in his account, leaving her broke and humiliated. She said she'd tried to warn people. He always stays just on the right side of the law. The police said it was a civil matter that I should have known better. Lucas's grip tightened on the phone. I'm sorry that happened to you, Sarah, he said, but I promise you I'm going to stop him. He's not going to do this to anyone else. He hung up. Lucas sat back in his chair, a grim smile on his face. He finally had what he needed. Now it was time to set his plan in motion. The charity event was in full swing when Lucas arrived, tugged at the collar of his rented tuxedo, and felt out of place among Austin's elite. He pushed the discomfort aside, though, and focused on the task at hand. He spotted Troy across the room, holding court with a group of admiring listeners. Megan stood at his side, laughing at something he'd said, which made Lucas's blood boil. He forced himself to stay calm, though, because everything hinged on his timing. He made his way to the stage, nodded at the event organizer he'd befriended, and said, "Over the past week, as he climbed the steps, he caught Troy's eye. The smug bastard actually winked at him. Over the past week, as he climbed the steps, he caught Troy's eye. The smug bastard actually winked at him. Ladies and gentlemen," Lucas said into the microphone, his voice echoing through the ballroom. "I know I'm not on the program tonight, but I have an important announcement to make." The crowd fell silent, all eyes turning to him. Lucas took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "Many of you know. Troy Caldwell," he continued, gesturing to where Troy stood. "Troy's been a pillar of our community, a successful businessman and a generous donor to many causes." Troy beamed, clearly eating up the praise, but his smile faltered as Lucas went on. "Troy's got another side, though. That side preys on vulnerable women, convincing them to invest in fake property deals before disappearing with their money." Lucas saw Megan's face go pale as she looked from him to Troy. "I have here," he said, holding up a folder. "It contains sworn statements from 3 of Troy's victims. These women lost everything because they trusted him." He then produced bank records which showed how Troy had funneled their money through shell companies before, withdrawing it in cash. The murmur grew louder as Troy pushed his way through the crowd. The crowd was now roaring with rage. "This is slander," Troy shouted. "You can't prove any of this," Lucas smiled coldly. "Actually, I can. Sarah, Lena, Jessica." 3 women stood up from different parts of the room. Each one locked eyes with Troy. Their expressions were a mix of anger and vindication. "These brave women are here tonight to tell their stories," Lucas said. "I'm here to make sure that Troy Caldwell never hurts anyone else." Once more, chaos broke out in the ballroom. People were shouting, and security was moving in. In the back of the room, Lucas heard the unmistakable sound of police sirens, but he was only focused on Megan. She stood frozen in place, staring at him with a look of shock. Was that admiration? Lucas stepped down from the stage and made his way towards her. Troy tried to intercept him, but 2 burly security guards grabbed him. Arms held him back. "You think this changes anything?" Troy snarled. "You're still a loser. You're a grease monkey who couldn't keep his wife satisfied." Lucas stopped in front of him, a cold smile playing on his lips. "Maybe," he said softly, "but at least I'm not a criminal. Enjoy prison, Troy." He raised a hand to stop him. His voice was hard. "I didn't do this for you. I did it because it was right." Megan's eyes filled with tears. "Lucas, I'm so sorry. I had no idea you're right." Lucas interrupted. "You had no idea about a lot of things." He looked her up and down, taking in the expensive dress and jewelry. Troy had no doubt bought her. "I hope it was worth it." Without waiting for a response, Lucas turned and walked away. As he pushed through the stunned crowd, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It was done. Troy was finished, and Megan would have to live with the consequences of her choices. Lucas stepped out into the cool night air, taking a deep breath for the first time since Megan had walked out. He felt like he could breathe again. He'd gotten his revenge, but more than that, he'd reclaimed his self-respect. As he walked to his truck, Lucas pulled out his phone and dialed a familiar number. "Marcus, yeah, it's done." "No, I'm fine. Actually, I'm better than fine. Listen, you want to grab a beer? I've got a great story to tell you." The early morning sun streamed through the blinds of Lucas's apartment, casting long shadows across the floor. He was sitting at his kitchen table, nursing a cup of strong black coffee, and replaying the events of the previous night. The sharp ring of his cell phone cut through the silence. He glanced at the screen, his jaw tightening as he saw Megan's name. After a moment's hesitation, he answered, "What do you want?" Her voice came through. It was small. Lucas was hesitant. "We need to talk. Can we meet somewhere?" He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Part of him wanted to tell her to go to hell, but another part said, "Fine. Zilker Park by the fountain. 1 hour." He hung up before she could respond and dialed another number. "Marcus, yeah, it's me. Listen, I need a favor." An hour later, Lucas stood by the fountain in Zilker Park. The fountain in Zilker Park. His hands were deep in his pockets, and he was thinking about all the memories he had there. Picnics, concerts, lazy Sunday afternoons. Now it felt like a battlefield. He saw Megan approaching. Her steps were slow and uncertain. She looked different. Gone were the designer clothes and perfectly styled hair. Instead, she wore jeans and a simple t-shirt. Megan said, "Lucas, thank you for meeting me." He nodded and said, "You wanted to talk, so talk." Megan took a deep breath and said, "I don't even know where to start. What you did last night exposing Troy like that, I didn't do it for you." Megan interjected quickly, "I know it was tough, but it was still pretty incredible and brave." Lucas let out a bitter laugh. "That makes it okay? You threw away our marriage for a con man you barely knew." Megan's eyes filled with tears. "I know I was stupid and selfish. I got caught up in the excitement and the attention. I convinced myself that I deserved more than you were giving me. I was wrong. I was wrong. You were always the better man, Lucas." Lucas felt a momentary surge of warmth and love for Megan, but then he remembered the pain and humiliation, and his heart hardened. "Is that all he asked?" he said coldly. Megan's face fell. "I was hoping maybe we could try again and start over," she replied. Megan said quickly, "I know it's a lot to ask, but I love you, Lucas. I never stopped loving you. What we had was real and it was good. We can get that back for a split second." Lucas wavered. He was torn between having Megan back and putting their family back together. But then he remembered Troy's smug face and Megan's cruel words that day she left. He shook his head firmly. "We can't, Lucas. Please, no. Megan, listen to me. What we had is gone. You made sure of that when you walked out. I'm not the same man I was. You're certainly not the same woman you were either." Megan was crying now. Lucas said, "It's not about changing. It's about trust and respect. You broke that trust. You disrespected me. You exposed Troy. You got what you wanted." Megan said, "You're just going to throw away 10 years. I didn't throw anything away. Revenge isn't that enough?" "This isn't about revenge, Lucas. It's about consequences. Actions have consequences. Megan, you made your choice. Now you have to live with it." Megan's face crumpled. "So, you're just going to throw away 10 years? I didn't throw anything away, Lucas." Megan shot back. "You did that the day you decided I wasn't enough for you." There was a heavy silence between them. In the distance, children laughed as they played on the park playground. Life went on, oblivious to their drama. Finally, Megan spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "What happens now? I'm feeling pretty tired now. We're going our separate ways. I've already filed for divorce. My lawyer will be in touch with yours." Megan's voice broke on his name. He held up a hand, stopping her. Standing alone by the fountain, he didn't look back as Lucas approached the park exit. He saw Marcus waiting for him, leaning against his car. "How'd it go?" Marcus asked as Lucas got closer. "That happened." "What did you say?" "I told her no," Lucas said simply. "It's over for good this time." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "I'm proud of you, man. That couldn't have been easy." Lucas managed a small smile. It wasn't easy, but it was the right thing to do. He glanced back towards the fountain where Megan was. She was still standing there, shoulders slumped in defeat. "Come on, let's get out of here," she said. As they drove away from the park, Marcus cleared his throat. "So, what's next for you? Are you going to take some time off? Maybe do some traveling?" Lucas shook his head. "I've got other plans. Remember that auto shop on 5th Street? One that's been up for sale?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Yeah, Carl's old place. What about it?" "I'm buying it." "What?" 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 "I'm buying it." "One." "What?" "I'm buying it." "What?" "I'm buying it." "What?" "I'm buying it." "What?" "It's been a while, Marcus. I just didn't realize." He watched the Austin skyline grow larger as they approached downtown. "I've spent too many years letting life happen to me. It's time I took control." Marcus grinned. Well, right then, Lucas Hart, business owner, has a nice ring to it. For the first time. In just a few weeks, Lucas was smiling from ear to ear. "Yeah, it does, doesn't it?" The next few months flew by in a blur of activity. Lucas threw himself into renovating the old auto shop, working long hours to get everything ready for the grand opening. He hired a small team of mechanics who were invested in state-of-the-art technology. Lucas also got some business management training at the local college the day before the opening. He stood in the middle of the garage, looking around at his new place of work. It was a far cry from the run-down garage. Fresh paint was on the walls, new tools were on pegboards, and a sleek computer system was in place. Marcus walked in and stopped at the front desk. He looked around and said, "Wow, Lucas, this place looks amazing." Lucas grinned. He felt a surge of pride. "Thanks, man. I can hardly believe it myself." Marcus wandered around, examining the equipment. "You nervous about tomorrow?" he asked. "A little," Lucas admitted, "but mostly excited. This is what I've always wanted, is to run my own shop, be my own boss." Marcus nodded, a sly smile playing on his lips. "Well, in that case, I've got something for you." He pulled a small wrapped package from his jacket pocket and handed it to Lucas. Curious, Lucas tore off the wrapping paper. Inside was a simple wooden plaque with the words, "Hearts Auto Repair" carved into it. "Elegant script, Marcus. This is for you." Lucas trailed off, overcome with emotion. "Every business needs a sign, right? I figured you could hang it up out front." Lucas pulled his friend into a tight hug. "Thank you for everything. I couldn't have done this without you." As they broke apart, Marcus's expression grew serious. "I ran into Megan the other day." Lucas stiffened slightly. "Oh, Marcus," he nodded. "Yeah, at the grocery store she asked about you. What did you tell her?" "The truth," Marcus said, shrugging. "You're doing great. You're opening your own business." Lucas was quiet for a moment, processing this. "How did she seem?" "Sad," Marcus said, but he didn't know. "Maybe a little proud, too." "Tell you congratulations." Lucas nodded slowly. "Thanks for telling me." He paused, then added, "I hope she's doing okay." Marcus studied his friend's face. "Don't you regret your decision?" Lucas shook his head firmly. "No, it was the right call. We can't go back and I don't want to. This is my future now." Just then, the bell over the door jingled. The doorbell rang again. Lucas turned, ready to say they weren't open yet, but the words died on his lips. A young woman stood in the doorway, looking slightly embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I know you're not open yet, but my car just started making this awful noise, and I saw your lights were on." Lucas gave her a nod and said, "No problem at all. Let's take a look, shall we?" "I'm Lucas," he added, offering his hand. The woman's face lit up with relief. "Thank you so much. I'm Sarah." As they walked to her car, Lucas felt a sense of rightness settle over him. This was where he belonged. Not dwelling on the past, but moving forward and helping people. Tomorrow was the big day. Hearts Auto Repair would officially open its doors. But in this moment, guiding a client to her troubled vehicle, Lucas knew his new life had already begun. 6 months later, Lucas stood behind the counter of his thriving auto shop, going over the day's receipts. The bell over the door jingled, and he looked up. He was about to greet her, but his smile faltered slightly as he saw who it was. Megan. She stood awkwardly in the doorway, looking both familiar and strange at the same time. "Lucas, I hope it's okay that I stopped by. The place looks great. You've done really well for yourself. Did you need your car looked at?" "No, I just wanted to see how you were doing and to say congratulations in person. I'm really proud of you." "Lucas." For a moment, Lucas felt a twinge of the old pain and longing, but it's like an echo of a memory now. "I appreciate that," he said sincerely. "How have you been?" "I'm okay. I'm teaching at a new school now, trying to figure things out." Lucas nodded, and an awkward silence fell between them. Finally, Megan spoke again. "Listen, Lucas, I know things can never go back to how they were, but I was hoping maybe we could be friends." Eventually, Lucas thought about what she'd said. Part of him wanted to say no and keep that door firmly closed, but as he looked at Megan and really looked at her, he saw someone trying to make amends and grow. "I don't know, Megan," he said honestly. "A lot has happened, but maybe someday." A small, hopeful smile appeared on Megan's face. "I'll take it, maybe just then." One of Lucas's mechanics called out from the garage. "Boss, we need you back here for a sec." Lucas held up a hand to acknowledge the call. He turned back to Megan. "I've got to get back to work." Megan nodded, understanding. "Of course. Thanks for talking to me, Lucas. And really, congratulations on all of this. You deserve it." She turned to. As she was leaving, Lucas called out to Megan. She paused, looking back. "I hope you find what you're looking for," he said sincerely. Megan's eyes glistened slightly. Thank you, Lucas. I hope you found what you were looking for, too. As the door closed behind her, Lucas took a deep breath. You felt okay. Not angry, not bitter, just at peace. He headed back to the garage where his team was waiting for him. He was helping out with a particularly tricky engine repair when he joined the team, offering his expertise and encouragement. Lucas felt a surge of contentment. This was his life now. Not perfect, not always easy, but his. He'd faced betrayal, fought for justice, and come out stronger on the other side. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Lucas knew he was ready to face them head-on. The engine started up with a roar, and his team let out a cheer. Lucas smiled and patted his lead mechanic on the back. This is exactly where I'm meant to be, he thought.